Hello again, and welcome back to week 23 of year 3 of the Religious Education Initiative. This is day 2. We're reading a saying from Elder Aimilianos of Simona Petra. He is a recently reposed elder and spiritual father. He was born in Greece in 1934 and became a monastic in 1960 in a monastery in northern Greece. Uh, as his piety and wisdom became evident, he was appointed as an abbot in Meteora, and then in 1983 he and his monastics were invited to repopulate the ancient monastery of Simonopetra on the Holy Mountain. He fell asleep in the Lord in 2019, just a few years ago. So he's talking about suffering, about afflictions. So he says, every day, everyone around you is undergoing a kind of martyrdom. It is impossible to find someone who is not experiencing some form of affliction. You and I may be close, we may know each other well, yet I may be completely unaware that you are suffering. I may have no idea that every day you undergo a kind of martyrdom. And this works both ways, for neither do you know about my sufferings. Each soul has its mysteries that no one else can ever know. The truth is that afflictions are not the signs of God's absence or abandonment, but rather of his presence. Afflictions are like the kneading of the dough in the making of the bread. They are the preparations for the mystical marriage, and without them, the soul is left unformed, cold, and alone. It is affliction alone that can tear us away from our isolated individual existence and transform it into something much more whole and open. Now, it would be beautiful to read this passage in its larger context, but I think there's a value to reading a short passage because it is that much more challenging. And to take the time really to reflect on this, to engage with this, because and I think there are 2 points that we should take away from this. The first paragraph here is really to say that we should not judge one another. We should not criticize one another. None of us know the burdens that anyone else around us is carrying. What we know is our own burdens, and those are quite enough for any of us to carry. Which isn't to say that we shouldn't strive and struggle as we become aware of someone else's burdens and struggles to bear them with one another, or at the very least to pray for one another. But judgment, criticism, these things we should flee from because we don't know what anyone else is carrying. But then he moves to a different point, not how we should process the fact that everyone is suffering some affliction, but how should we process the fact that we ourselves are suffering? What is the purpose of it? Uh, and we tend to view sufferings as God's absence. And he says this is exactly wrong. Afflictions, sufferings, are not signs of God's absence, but rather of his presence. And this is perhaps the most difficult word. And it may be easily misinterpreted or misapplied. But I think the point that we are meant to take away from this, the point that we can reflect on without error, is that we know how we live, we know what we do when we are content and undisturbed. As human beings, when we are content and undisturbed, we become complacent, we become apathetic, we become selfish. And in truth, I think this is universal. I don't know of anyone that successfully avoids this. There's a reason that, as human beings, we love to look at the lives of the rich and famous, of celebrities. And yet, what we find in the lives of celebrities is that for all their fame, for all their wealth, for all their power, for all that there is no pleasure that they must deny themselves, they are deeply miserable people. Um, whereas we find very often that those who are most impoverished are the ones who are most willing to be gracious, to love, to serve, to sacrifice themselves. Um, eh, Now, this can all be taken too far. The point is not that we should look at this and apply the principle to the entire world around us. The point is that we should reflect upon ourselves and recognize the mercy in the affliction that is allowed to us, that God permits to come to us, because those afflictions, those struggles, they awaken us to the frailty of this life. They awaken us to the temporariness of everything we might desire in this world. They remind us that only the Lord lasts. Only the Lord's life and love and joy can be trusted. Only there can we entrust ourselves in safety. Uh, and perhaps if we simply look at it and say, this is how we are delivered from selfishness, uh, then this by itself is enough. But at any rate, I would urge, don't listen to me talking about this, but listen to the elder, who will probably be uh, proclaimed and recognized as a saint in the coming decades, uh, and reflect on this consistent witness of the church, that suffering and afflictions are not a curse, but instead are the means of our salvation. It is a hard word, and yet we see it proved in the lives of the saints. So that's enough for day 2. God bless you all. See you for day 3.